Absolute Top Up. This hand was reasonably famous, I believe, so you might know the result already.
Yeah,
But maybe talk about this hand a little bit.
got two fish in one hand. It's pretty big. All right.
So checking on the flop, is that a thing that's because this nature of the board in cutoff button, you're going to check a lot, or
Yeah, well, cut off on versus Button. Actually, Button has like a pretty strong range because he can't just flat anything. He's got to be prepared for the button or for one
blinds
of
to
the blinds to
squeeze?
squeeze.
Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of the time, if the board isn't particularly good for cutoff, you can just check your entire range or check 75% of the time, 75 to 80% of the time. I would actually, if I'm in Llama's shoes, I'm expecting to see a check most of the time here.
And then what kind of stabbing strategy does the in position want to adopt, considering they're getting checked to a lot? Do they want to stab small and like, force your opponent to like raise fold call, like, or do they want to stab a bit larger and check back some hands like tens and nines and whatnot?
It depends on the texture. On something like this, I think you could choose anything 30, 50, 75, and just kind of pick a strategy that you like. As the boards get more Broadway heavy, you start sizing up. So if this was something like King Queen 3, then I'd expect cutoff to have more C bets in that scenario. And if they check to us, a solver would probably stab for pot or check.
Okay.
Or this is more neutral.
And for top up, is there really only one option here, or is calling like something you could choose to do as well?
Call. I don't know what he does. I guess does he raise this?
Well, what do you think is most reasonable?
Oh. Well, the standard play would just be, I'm pretty sure, to call. But I mean, you could play a raise, depending on the size as well. If you're going to check raise, I mean, so if he's check raising, obviously he's blocking pocket threes, which is nice. Sometimes you prefer to have hands that have a backdoor with it. So,
Right.
kind of hard, I guess, to have. I guess he wouldn't have 3-4 suited, but like let's just say theoretically, you'd have 3-4 suited, or he'd have king three with the king of diamonds. So hands basically when you're check raising, you want to have hands that have the possibility of making the nuts by the river because you're growing the pot. And so if you raising a hand that doesn't have that quality can be a bit trickier, but blocking a set is good. So can't fault it too much.
Yeah, I guess like he does raise, I believe, and the reason I felt like maybe this was more standard is because you check call. I mean, every turn fucking sucks. You're drawing it like a king or a three, basically. Like maybe a queen, maybe a five is okay, but when you check and they blast, it's not like a great spot, right?
Yeah, you can't raise or bet just to avoid annoying decisions. You just have to deal with them. Otherwise, you could make polarization errors or yeah, that would probably be something that I would recommend to a lot of players that are coming up is to not make decisions on prior streets just to avoid having tough decisions later on. Just be a poker player and deal with it rather than make a decision that
Okay,
could be off.
so you think this idea in this spot of like protecting a hand that has certainly enough to continue versus the bet by letting like all these random cards get there that force you to release your hand in equity isn't really that good of a idea in this spot. It's better to check call and just play the hand out.
Yeah, I think you could consider it, but it's also considering what the expected value of your entire range is going to be. Like, sure, King 3 might get blasted off, the hand, but it's also bottom pair. So that's going to happen. You're not really making a ton of money with bottom pair. You could think if your opponent's going to bet the turn a lot and apply a lot of pressure, well, the times you have aces, then you're going to make way more money. So I just kind of think about it like that.
Okay. Llama, I think he calls, and then we see a turn decision here. And what kind of bet sizes would you use this? We're like a little bit deep to start the hand, I guess, 130. Check raising flop and sort of nice brick on the turn here.
Yeah, I think three-quarter pot is pretty much the standard size in a spot like this. Some people could venture an overbet depending on what you've studied, but I'd say three-quarter pot plus probably.
Yeah. I don't actually remember what he does. He does do three-quarter pot, and he's going to get small raised. Well, not even small, but like a threatening amount that's not all in.
Yeah.
And maybe talk a little bit about Llama's sizing here. Is it very standard? Would there be any other sizing options, like a smaller raise or even like a more committing raise? Or do you want to find something in the middle and have a mix of different hands, some of which obviously able to fold to a shove?
Yeah, it seems like a fine raise size. He might be able to size it up a little bit more if he wanted to go that route, but anywhere from half pot to three-quarter pot, 70% pot, whatever, seems fine. It might be a little bit, yeah, it's just a bit too big to just go all in, but I don't think you'd necessarily want to go smaller. I think some of the thinking with choosing a size like this is if top up calls, then Llama has like, whatever, a pot size bet or less than that to jam on the river. So it feels very natural to raise half pot on the turn and then shove the river,
And
at
as
least in terms of the sequence.
yep, and as top up here, is there any way you can do anything in theory, or would it be just suicide?
Yeah, well, I think you should fold because your hand just has zero equity or very, very little equity when called. So that would be the good theory boy explanation for just folding.
Do you ever make
But
these kind of plays, Matt, where you just have a read and say "fuck you"?
um, sh- sure. I I don't know what his read would have been necessarily. Um, But yeah, I mean, we're poker players, so naturally we're going to be willing to go out on intuition and make decisions like that. I just typically, if I would go on intuition with something, I'd pick a hand. So the reason that I would be afraid in top ups shoes is that if you're wrong, you could be making like a 20 BP mistake or something like that. I can try to. So what he's thinking though is like he's basically thinks Llama might be over bluffing and he's blocking threes. So I guess that's a big part of his, raise calling range. So if you're blocking the nuts and beating draws, then that could be an interesting hand. I just think you just have too little equity to be jamming it in here.
Yeah, but they're the ones where you feel good if you get it right. Like if he waits for like some good hand to ship it in, then it doesn't feel as good as when you go after them with the dusty piece of shit. I don't know if it's just hero
Yeah,
mindset or if it's good poker, but I think we all enjoyed watching Ivy when we were younger. Just never be wrong in these kind of spots. It was quite impressive. But yeah,
yeah.
these days it feels like
It's
you
it's
do
tougher
this and
to
you just
say.
get
Yeah.
called by something good.
Poker, it's definitely a lot, especially online. It's a lot like chess, more so where it's harder. You don't necessarily want to give up the big pots like that as much on pure intuition, where it's not like that Ivy clip where he six bets flop heads up in some tournament with air and he's correct and it's like the best thing ever. It's kind of risky to play that way against these guys. I mean, Llama, he's a very interesting player to play against. He's someone that's capable of anything. And so there's times where he'll make some ridiculous, banana play that looks bad, but it does wind up paying off later on for him because people will want to play back. And so he can kind of,
Yeah, so
even though he was,
maybe break down a little bit about what he's thinking with his 10-9 here, choosing to raise the turn.
yeah, so I guess he doesn't want to only bluff with diamonds because okay, so if you're picking hands to choose as raise candidates, what are you thinking about? So the number one thing you want to think about is blocking the nuts. So that if he had let's say 5x of diamonds, that would also be another potential candidate because he'd be blocking pocket fives or queen five suited. So if he has a nine, I mean, top up doesn't have nines, but maybe he has some oddball, queen nine suited, he check raise for some reason. But okay, so we want to block the nuts. Another part of it is we don't want to block their folding range. And so the thing about if he only bluffed diamonds is that we want top up to bet fold diamonds. We would want him to have a hand like, I don't even know, like king, whatever, king seven suited. And so by having a nine, we're actually avoiding his folding range because we don't expect him to bet fold to be betting the turn with a nine of diamonds. We'd expect him to check if he turned a flush draw there. And so we wind up, if he somehow had queen nine, that's positive. But then we're also avoiding his folding range and we still have equity because if he does, jam like he does, we actually have a pair plus draw. We're not confined to strictly draws that could never call or could never, never have any pair in them. So it's kind of diversifying his range while still meeting the basic conditions of raising.
Yeah, nice. I mean, it's a weird one. Like, I guess it's a value raise, right?
It turned out to be in practice. But let's say Llama had 5-4 of diamonds, would you have considered that a value raise?
No, I think that would
Yeah.
be a huge mistake, probably.
Okay, so why?
Because it doesn't really get that much done. I guess it punishes your opponent when they turn a gut shot, like they can't realize their equity. But raise calling it off feels a lot
Oh,
worse.
raise calling it off. Yeah. Oh.
Whereas
So what's the difference?
this hand crushes all 5x diamonds, and 5x diamonds is easily a hand that could play aggressively from what's it called? So there's what 4-5, 5-6, king five, and ace five, and they could all easily check raise like maybe 100% of the time, or I don't know. I imagine that they'd check raise a lot. And like you said, the guy's probably checking the flop a lot with a lot of his range, maybe even range checking. So we expect basically to stack those hands, or at least put them, like we're going to win a lot of money off those hands every time. And if the opponent has ace two, ace four of diamonds, or even some other flush draw, Like he could have check raised like, you know, a king 10 or king jack, or I don't know, something. But the king 10 and king jack seem reasonable. Barreling the turn, not folding them to a raise. We do have the 10 of diamonds though. I don't know. It just feels like there's a lot of draws that we own. And fine, like say he has a queen. Like, is he really going to ship over our turn raise, or is he going to call?
Well, part of it is and there's instances. All right, I'll give you like even a different combo.
Okay.
Let's say you have 5-4 of hearts.
Okay, well,
So
this
now
is
you have
more raise foldable.
Right. So when I'm saying about raising, I'm not saying like we're raising for value. I'm just kind of differentiating between different. Because if you're bluff raising, you're not bluffing like king jack of hearts. You want to have a hand that has some equity, but also blocker properties.
I guess like ace,
So I think
ace 3 of spades could be something maybe. You bet call the flop.
potentially.
You block something, but you don't really have showdown. You got to be scared of the 5x of diamonds, so that's the only problem.
Yeah, it's a tricky thing because pocket fives is also a part of both people's value range when we're getting stacks in. While yes, you're taking away some of the bluffing hands, it's also blocking one of the scariest hands in the range of pocket fives. For him to check raise and then bet and then be willing to reshove, kind of nice.
Yeah, so it's quite a strange hand to see.
But because I know a lot of people wouldn't think about it. I mean, I haven't looked at any of these hands that you kind of solver. I have no idea, but wouldn't even consider raising 5-4 of hearts. But you can see that's how it could be an interesting hand to have as a bluff when, let's say, the river's like the 10 and your opponent has ace queen and then you jam. They're not going to be expecting that, and that's how you're not necessarily thinking, oh, they're always folding this turn. It can be a spot where you can get in a creative turn bluff and then get the river bluff through.
Yeah, I like that element of the game.
Restricted to diamonds. You're like, that's the thing is like if you're playing it, 50 NL, I would assume that my opponent's bluffing range would basically be a missed flush draw. They wouldn't have totally like diversified their range, and you wouldn't. If you go back to what I was saying before, like what are the main things you should think about in any spot that you're raising? The number one thing is blocking the nuts. The number two thing is dodging their bluffing range. 5-4 of hearts does a good job of blocking pocket fives and staying away from their bet folds.
Cool spot. Quite a strange hand to witness from both of them.